Andre and Lawrence at the beginning of the conference said that we are looking for a coping strategy for Hong Kong for the next 50 years to recover from the turbulence and also to define our unique proposition and advantage for the city to thrive. So we've seen lots of policy approach or top-down approach in Asia when we're talking about building a resilient city, right, through the social security projects and public work. Hong Kong, however, in my observation, is a very, very different. Like we have a vibrant civil society and we have lots of citizen-led movement and initiative. And that made Hong Kong just a very collective, a sense of collectivism, driven by huge entrepreneurial energy and the sense of to-do attitude. So a grassroots community has been really, really important in Hong Kong, and those co-created by the ordinary citizen like you and me has a different commitment to the shared values and shared vision that we all that in the community than the policymakers. So by creating the sense of belonging and collective identity, this community usually are able to boost the individual as well as the collective resilience. So that is our approach to like why are we talking about community. So today we're very honored to be joined by 4 very influential community builders and thought leaders in Hong Kong and in the Greater Bay Area. So Yang is calling in from Shenzhen, and the rest of our speakers are based in Hong Kong. So very briefly about our speakers today, we have Jeffry, and Jeffry is with Christian Action for over 11 years. So that's a really long time fighting for the rights for ethnic minorities and for refugees. And then we have Sonalie, and she's also a great impact maker in the green space, and she's a founder and editor-in-chief for Green Queen, an award-winning impact media platform. She's also the founder and CEO of Echo Warehouse, a global sourcing platform for certified organic products. And then we have Yang Smejkal. Yang is known to be a community builder for entrepreneurs and startup community at Startup Grand a couple of years ago. And Startup Grand is the world's largest entrepreneurship community, connecting more than 1 million entrepreneurs across the world, and 80 cities are in China. And Yang was the community director of China and APAC. And last but not least, we have Jeff. Jeff is the founder and CEO of Impact Hong Kong. For those who don't know Impact Hong Kong, which I assume is very few, it is a charity transforming life of thousands of homeless in Hong Kong. It started with just a few people to show kindness to those in need and really start to grow into this humanitarian movement. He is also a CEO and founder of Love 21 Foundation, a charity supporting the Down syndrome and autistic community with sport and nutritional programs. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. So without further ado, each of you have very different approach or somehow different approach in building community. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the community? Like, how did you get started? Why do you have this idea? Or how did you get involved? How does it reflect your personal journey and your personal values? So let's start with Jeffrey, and then we go to Sonalie, Yang, and Jeff.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and very honored to be amongst these amazing change makers. So yes, my name is Jeff Andrews. Do not confuse me with Jeff Rotmeyer. I'm the better looking, and I support Manchester United. He supports Liverpool. So, you know, we already know who's better. So yes, I'm born and raised in Hong Kong. I'm of Indian descent, but throughout, you know, as an ethnic minority in Hong Kong, it's not been an easy journey. You know, many of us have been part of the institutional racism, in fact, through many government policies, which hindered our progress into mainstreaming into society. So for example, I was not taught Cantonese, so, you know, in school. And therefore, when I came out to the working world in Hong Kong, many of us minorities could not get jobs and eventually walked a very wrong path. For me, I saw the other side of society, where when you are neglected, when you are kind of just seen as an outsider, and it was very difficult. But throughout my time, I was maybe fortunate. I was arrested as a young kid and saved by a social worker, and I saw the impact that she made in me. And fortunately enough, I myself became one of the first ethnic minority social workers in Hong Kong, and started working for an organization called Christian Action. We are based in Chungking Mansions in Hong Kong, which is a very infamous building for sadly crime, and just a place where many minorities are all gathered together, and people don't want to go in there. So what I have done is I've worked very much with the grassroots, with people like these, and created many. For example, we do cultural tours. We actually bring people who have misconceptions of this place and bring them in for tours to understand the beautiful diversity that minorities bring to Hong Kong. And in fact, Jeff Rotmeyer and I will definitely remember last year in the social movement, one of the most craziest things happened was in Hong Kong. Suddenly, minorities were put on the spotlight, and people were threatening to attack the mosque, Chunky Mansions, and South Asian people. So what me and a few friends did was we said, no, this is not Hong Kong. Let's stand outside Chunky Mansions, provide water bottles to people, and show them the friendly side, the humanity side of minorities. And believe it or not, that was a huge movement of change. And thanks to that one, historic event, um, um, we've actually created a new tour of Chungking, and now we're so popular that every week, if it wasn't for COVID, we would be doing tour after tour for elderlies, local Chinese students, teachers, corporates, and we've seen huge change. 10 years ago, if you had asked people to come into Chungking Mansions, they would never want to come in. They would not even understand the differences between minorities. I'm proud to say, actually, through a tragic event, showed the huge extent of what we've done in the last 10 years. We had a fire in September in our community center in Chungking Mansions, a huge fire which pretty much destroyed our center. And what we did is we difficultly asked the public to raise funds for us. It's COVID. We're talking about a center in Chungking, a center that serves refugees, three things, which is not easy. And believe it or not, within 3 weeks, we raised $2.5 million, and we're now in the process of renovating the center. So you've seen that huge shift because, people like from us, from the grassroots movement, took ownership of the narrative that's for minorities. So I think that's the kind of thing that I'm excited to say, instead of a top down, it's really from the bottom up approach.
That's exciting. Sonalie, next one.
Hi, that's a really hard one to follow, Jeffrey. What an amazing story. And it shows how it's all about the people taking action for themselves and kind of creating their space. And that's really kind of how I would define what happened with Green Queen, which originally was just a blog, because by nature, I'm a researcher and I'm a sharer. I always am the person that people come to say, who should I go to for this? Or what restaurant should I go to? But of course, when I started Green Queen as a small little blog with no plans, the idea was I had recently understood that the world was not green enough and not safe enough and not healthy enough. And I wanted to change how I lived. And I wanted everyone to know what I had just discovered, because I couldn't believe that everybody wasn't talking about climate change and the problems in our food system and the issues with global health and what that was going to do. And this is in 2011, so a really long time ago at this point. And I just felt, okay, well, I'm just going to share my resources. And there's going to be other people, maybe a few. I was thinking a dozen, not more, because to be honest, in my real life, a lot of people thought I was a little bit strange. They just thought, what are you doing? Hong Kong is a finance city and Hong Kong is, a business city, and this green thing, forget it. But I think what I've learned from having created Green Queen and then discovering quickly that actually there were thousands of people that were reading it, which meant that they were interested, which meant that they were looking for this information, which is how I turned it into a media platform, because the real truth is that I actually didn't really want to be an influencer. A little fun fact is that for the first 4 years on Green Queen, there was no name and no photo of me, because I really just, that's not what I wanted to do. I never thought that I would become sort of a more public figure. This happened by accident, because I learned later that people want a founder, because that kind of helps with the authenticity. But really what I've learned throughout building Green Queen is that sometimes a city might look a certain way and you might not see these communities that are actually existing. But if you create this space for a certain community, then it will get filled. And I feel like that's what everyone on this panel does and has done.
That's inspirational. Thank you, Sonalie. Then Jan, goes to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again, Jesse and the team, for putting this together and bringing me in, because it's always fascinating to learn from people that, you know, to some extent it's so far away, right? Because, you know, we deal with startups and technology, and, you know, now I'm learning about these minorities and the problems and stuff that you don't really get to hear about every single day. And so I like this, you know, I really appreciate this opportunity to, you know, get exposed and kind of enlighten myself as well. And, you know, for me, so, you know, obviously, you know, I'm based in mainland China, I'm based in Shenzhen, and, you know, I'm a foreigner, right? So, you know, I had a hard time at the very beginning to really fit in. And especially in Shenzhen, when I look back, you know, five and a half years ago or 5 years ago, when I first landed in 2015 in Shenzhen, it wasn't really a place that would be internationalized. You know, there wasn't many, you know, English speaking communities. And of course, I didn't speak a word of Chinese or Mandarin when I landed in Shenzhen for the first time, because I kind of ended up in China by accident, in a sense, like very good accident, but it wasn't planned. I never studied Chinese. I never learned anything about China. It was a completely new world for me when I landed here. And, you know, so how I got involved with this community, because, you know, I think I remember back in high school and even at the university back in Czech Republic, where I come from, I've always been part of associations, and you really like, I'm extremely passionate about connecting people and bringing people value. Like if, you know, if I feel down at some point and, you know, I just want to, you know, get a better feeling, it's kind of selfish way of like making myself feel better. It's like really just bringing other people value. And that's something that I've been doing, you know, ever since I kind of started being active in business circles or community circles, association circles. And I did the same thing when I landed in Shenzhen. You know, I didn't know anyone. And I just kind of, you know, I just went out there. You know, I attended every event I could. And even though it was kind of strange back then, a foreigner connecting Chinese people to do business together or to actually get to know each other, it was very strange back then. And it's still kind of strange sometimes, you know, but you know, I still did it. And, you know, I learned a ton, and I met amazing people that I never thought of meeting, even, you know, big time, let's say, celebrities or influencers from the West landing in China and just trying to learn something about China. And because I was here as a foreigner trying to do something for the community, they just kind of ended up at my door as well, you know. And so I feel extremely lucky, and, you know, that's kind of how I got started with this, how I got involved. Really just, you know, having a need for myself, you know, meeting people and just learning about a different country when I didn't speak the language, when I didn't know anyone, you know. So yeah, that's kind of the story.
Fascinating. Thanks, Jan. Jeff, you're next up.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here with you guys. Yeah, so my name is Jeff Rotmeyer. So I'm the founder of Impact HK, supporting the homeless, and Love 21, supporting the Down syndrome and autistic community with sport and nutrition programs. And yeah, it's running two organizations. I never would have dreamt of this scenario. I never would have thought that when I came to Hong Kong, you know, 15 and a half years ago. I came here as an English teacher. I taught English in a public primary school and did that for 13 years. Quite early on when I came, I started working with the Down syndrome community as a volunteer, and just simply coaching them football. And, you know, that experience really opened me up in different ways. And I learned so much from that community, and a lot of what's really important in life. And I just owe them so much, because they really just changed my life. That experience then led to being introduced to a homeless population in Hong Kong, which I'd never thought of. And then, it started with a bit of a movement and just getting out and feeding people and inviting others to join me. And, similar to what, Sonalie said is, we provided an opportunity. And I think, the amount of caring people in Hong Kong just kind of stepped up, and they wanted that. And then we kind of took advantage of that, and we created a movement. It led to a path of now running 2 different NGOs, Impact HK, which have roughly had about 6,000 volunteers in the last 2 years. And we're a movement now that's feeding, 500 meals a day on the streets and housed well over 250 individuals into shelter. And Love 21 Foundation currently support 80 local Hong Kong families with Down syndrome or autism, and a really holistic program of sport plus nutrition. And yeah, it's been a really exciting ride. And yeah, who would have thought, but it's going really well. And we're really excited to continue this movement going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for fantastic sharing. So it's just really interesting happened that every one of us here on the panel are kind of like foreigner to the city at the beginning, me included. I'm from China, but I've been in Hong Kong for 7 years. So there's lots of kind of barriers at the beginning, but soon you create community, or you're part of the community, and that just make you, part of the one. So also very interesting, different approach. Jeffrey are, very convicted to give voices to minorities, and Sonalie started from people's demand for, having those sources, having those ratings or the recommendations. And Young start with, very genuine kind of passion for connecting people. And finally, Jeff is, started really with a simple act of sharing the kindness. So that is really fascinating. So why don't we just move on to talk about our mission, for the mission and the purpose of your community. Like, why did it exist in the first place? And how does it help to achieve the goal at personal, at like individual and collective level that are what we call more like meaningful and for the evolutionary purposes. So we have like 2 levels, right? At an individual level, how does it accelerate people's individual growth? And at a collective level, how does it help to bring people together for meaningful purposes? So we can reverse the order this time, and we can start with Jeff.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I think the greatest commonality amongst, the 2 charities that we're working with, Love 21 and Impact HK, is really standing up for people and providing the best opportunity that we can. It's something that's become a passion of mine and a real mission of mine in my life, is really, fighting for people. And it really kind of pains me when I see individuals unfairly judged and limited. If you look at the Down syndrome community, for example, this is a community that is full of ability, the ability to really change my life. That's a pretty big ability to change someone's life. And that's what they did. Their love and their ability to live in the moment without all the thoughts in our head of fear, of judgment of others. They put themselves forward, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But typically in society, when individuals see someone with Down syndrome or autism, their very first thought is about that person's disability. They think instantly about what that person cannot do. You look at the homeless as well. You have individuals who are so unfairly judged, right? I mean, even I work with a lot of students. You have kids that have never, ever met a homeless individual who already know in their mind that the homeless are lazy, that it's a choice. You have individuals in society that hate homeless people, literally hate them. And I know that, if you had met the homeless individuals that we work with day in and day out, it would be impossible for you to hate these individuals, because they're beautiful people, just like you and I. So really, in both charities, I think it's so important, when you have that much judgment being put on our beneficiaries, you have to work extra hard to really educate society and open up as many eyes as possible, really, to the importance of caring for people. Not looking at individuals for what they cannot do, but obviously looking at individuals for what they can do, not just looking at their needs, but also looking at their passions and their talents and their abilities. And I think that's really our mission for both charities.
That's beautiful. What about you, Jan?
Yeah, so, for me, what we do are, all the communities, I mean, Startup Grind, that was part of the journey, but, all the other communities or all the other events or things that I'm involved with, it's really, right now it's kind of circling around bringing people to China, or kind of educating people about what's going on here, because of course, even during this time, during this pandemic, there's a lot of conversations and stuff. And even before that, there was a lot of people that really didn't know what's going on here, and they were maybe misinformed. And I was the same type of person before, because when I was in Europe, 6 years ago, we didn't really get much information about what's happening in China. And I didn't even know that city like Shenzhen existed. I only knew that there's probably Beijing and Shanghai, and maybe I've heard about Chengdu because of pandas, and that's probably it. And so basically all the communities that I'm involved, be it Startup Grind, or now, we have the D Network, and we have a podcast, and, we interview top entrepreneurs and executives in China, both foreign and local. And we really try to kind of, give people information, what's happening on the ground. And it's really, just bridging, really being that bridge. As a foreigner living in China, I will kind of always be a bridge. Doesn't matter if I host events or if I build a business that has some sort of service in it or product, it will always be about bridging, because I have kind of those two perspectives, right? I have the perspectives from the outside, and I also have the foreign perspective from the inside. And so that's basically what all the communities kind of, circle around. And, it was basically, it became very popular. I remember that, when I landed here in Shenzhen for the first time, there was not much happening, and not many people would be coming through Shenzhen. And then over the course of 1, 2, 3 years, you would literally have everyone, as before, everybody wanted to go to Silicon Valley and learn what Silicon Valley is doing with tech, and what Facebook and Google and all these companies are coming up with. And then, basically since 2017 and onwards, people wanted to do the same with China, and so, there was basically a lot of people coming in, but not many active people, not many active communities in English or international ones in Shenzhen that would be basically, connecting the people to the right resources. And I think, it also came from that, let's say even pain point, is that Shenzhen is kind of an immigrant city, like Shenzhen, I don't want it to sound bad, but it doesn't really have much of a culture compared to Beijing, compared to other places, like the city didn't exist a couple, decades ago. And so it was kind of built from scratch, and there's a lot of immigrants. And so like everybody kind of feels that they're a guest here, even the locals, even the people from China, they kind of feel like, this is not my home really, like, I'm just here for work and stuff like that. And so what you see happening in a place like that, like it's sometimes very hard to get people out there, like get them from their office and have them participate in some just just basic events, conversations, just go for a beer and like let's just hang out and like let's see what's gonna come out of it. So that has been very hard, and that was a pain point for me as well. And so we kind of started doing these events and dinners and everything, and so yeah, it's basically all about bringing people in and kind of trying to help them to connect with the right people and with the right companies.
I think you definitely did a great job in identifying opportunities and seeing the need and acting upon it. So that was how it gets started and how it scales so fast. Beautiful. What about Sonalie?
Well, I think we define Green Queen as an impact media, which is a term I coined to kind of be very upfront about our agenda. I think all medias have an agenda, but they don't always share it. And we are basically trying to change minds and change behaviors. And as I said before, hold this space for people who want to be involved in the fight for a planet forward future. And I think that, we were the first sustainability media in Asia. And at the time that we started, the feedback was really that Asian people didn't care about sustainability, and they didn't care about being green, and they didn't care about the climate. And you know why I think that they didn't is because there was no representation from an Asian point of view. So we really filled that gap first from a Hong Kong point of view, which we keep still today. We always will have Hong Kong specific content and stories, but then we were able to grow to Asia, and now we really are the media of record for the Asian point of view, the Asian stories, the Asian change makers, the Asian companies, the Asian trends. And now the mainstream media in Asia actually, you know, repeats a lot of our articles, and we've helped a lot of kind of maybe thousands of businesses really get or organizations or people get visibility on a global scale, because we've created this space for Asia sustainable media. And so I think it really goes back to what a lot of the others are saying, is this idea of representation, and also believing that there are people out there, not allowing the status quo to define what you think about people. So for example, Jeff mentioned that, you know, people well, before I knew about Jeff, I remember my mom saying to me, oh yeah, people in Hong Kong just don't care about the homeless. And obviously Jeff has completely proved that wrong. And I think Green Queen has shown that also people do care about being green, and they care about recycling, and they care about conscious living, and they care about the planet, which, you know, sounds like an easy sell, given that we all need to live on this planet and we need its resources. But as we know, it's not that simple. So that's really the mission. The mission is to change minds, change behaviors. We have this kind of 50-50 split content vision or kind of strategy, where it's sort of 50% the bad news. So the issues, you know, the reality, the fact that, you know, things are not going well on the climate crisis side of things. And then the other 50% is the inspiration and the hope. And that's comes from showcasing the change makers, the leaders, the pioneers, the companies, the organizations, the brands, the movements that are fighting for this, you know, climate forward future, planet forward future. And I think that's a good kind of balance to have. You know, people sometimes say to me, I notice there's other sustainability media that come along and they want to just be positive. And of course it's wonderful to be positive, but I'm definitely a realist. And I think that people are, I don't believe in talking down to my audience. And I think that our audience is perfectly capable of getting the bad news and then seeing the solutions and acting upon those. And I think, you know, that's how you change people's minds. You give them the information, you give them the hope, and then they act in their own way. There's no prescribing. You do whatever you want with what we present. But I do believe that we make people think, and eventually it changes minds and behaviors.
It's kind of amazing how you have an agenda, which is, you know, this green revolution, where you're not trying to manipulate people. So you give them enough kind of freedom and kind of information for them to work with themselves. This is great. What about Jeffrey?
You know, again, I'm very inspired by the other speakers, and I think Sonalie was talking about representation, and I think that is something minorities, ethnic minorities, have struggled in Hong Kong. You know, people always say, "Oh, where'd you guys come from?" And you know, people thought after the handover in 1997, we just took a UFO and dropped down in Hong Kong. No, but we've been here 100 years. You know, we've contributed to the city, and you know, this is home. And what we've done in the last couple of years is we've decided to be our own narrative, you know, because what's happened is you have the media, you have the government, you have civil society, you have, you know, the local community who just think ethnic minorities don't belong here. They're just here for a temporary period of time. They don't speak Cantonese. They don't do enough to contribute to the city. And what we've done is telling them the fact is, after 97, many of us wanted to be policemen, but because of policies that asked us to have Cantonese reading and writing levels, we couldn't. So what did we do is, in fact, we, you know, changed the policies, the education system, to have more Cantonese for minorities. And today I'm very proud to say there are over 25 ethnic minority police officers. In fact, even me being an ethnic minority social worker, you know, I was the first. It's incredible. I only graduated in 2014. And how do we do this? We broke every policy, from lobbying, advocacy, to getting the local public to join in on us, to understand the struggle. And today I'm very proud, you know, we have our first doctors, nurses. Recently I found out we've had 3 medics, you know, and I think it's now we're mainstreaming into society. But that's not enough. What's happening is that we're not part of the political structure of Hong Kong where we have voice. Right now, we rely on someone, local Chinese, to be our kind of our channel in there. And in fact, a couple of months ago, I tried to stand in an election, and unfortunately, I lost. But I think what it taught the Hong Kong community was that, hey, we're here, we're part of the city, we care about it, and we're not just there as a minority representative, but we care for the greater good of the city. And I must say that was a huge shift, in a lot of the locals, the way they perceive minorities today. And I think we're continuing to push. The younger generation now are being a voice for themselves. Before, they would say, hey, look, our dads and moms just told us this is better than our hometown, so don't rock the boat. But now many of us are saying, no, this is our home. We are born, bred in the city. We have the same ideals and values of every other Hong Konger. So I'm proud we're shifting that, and maybe in 10 years' time, we won't even have to have this term ethnic minority.
No, Jeffrey, this is so great. I worked with lots of ethnic minority in my previous social enterprise. And the primary motivation for us is to give voices to the marginalized group. Absolutely. As most of them are fresh graduates and they have no other career path. They don't even think about other career path than becoming, some like very typical jobs for, I don't want to label it as typical, but like delivery, right? Like catering,
construction.
Exactly. So they want to break free from that kind of stereotyping, right? That labeling. So it's so great that the job that you're doing. I think it's giving a hope for the new generation of ethnic minorities. So thank you, everyone. I think that was great to kind of paint a high level picture of the mission and values. So now we're going to take a little turn into talking for very realistic terms of the challenges you're facing, right? Building communities encounters lots of challenges. And there are times that you feel people are not responding, they're not echoing the values that we're propagating or promoting. And there also can be times where you find helpless, that people in the community are not really driving it with you. So there are times that you feel lonely. Me being a community builder definitely had those challenges in my journey. So I would love to ask each one of you, what's the biggest challenge you have faced, and how did you overcome or never overcome it? Yeah, we can be more honest and I think open-minded here in this safe space. Let's start with Jeffrey.
I think personally for me, it's been, I would say the last 20 years of self-advocacy, which has always been a very lonely battle at times. One of my most painful stories to share is, people always say, oh, it's always Jeff, it's always you, it's always Jeff, ethnic minority complaining, Jeff. But one of the things I've always told myself is you have to be the voice for the voiceless. And one of the stories I could share is my mom. When she passed away in Hong Kong, we because we're Christians, we have to wait in line just like every Hong Konger, because space in Hong Kong. But when we approached the Chinese Christian cemetery in a beautiful spot in Pok Fulam, they rejected my mom, and they sent a letter saying that your mom is Christian, but she's not Chinese. So even in death, you can be segregated, and it it really shook me to the core. And I'm saying to myself, maybe this is just the way it is. Let it be. But what I've learned from my social worker who bailed me out from prison one day is you always have to believe in the sense of justice and the public and the people. So we went up, we put it out in the media. We said, hey, this is my mom and this is what happened. And guess what? Within 2 days, actually the next day, the people called us, the people that rejected us, and said, we're really sorry. And someone from the church community, very high up, heard about this, and he advocated. And believe it or not, my mom is the only non-Chinese right now in that cemetery. Is the only colored person, which is really weird. But that's the kind of thing. And I've always told myself, you just keep pushing. And maybe today you won't get a result. These days we're all asking about instant results. But for me, I've seen the 20 years of pushing different things for minorities, and it's worked out. I never imagined to be a social worker, never imagined to work in a crazy building like Chunky Mansions, never believe it to be a place of change. But here we are, and it is a lonely battle. But you can ask Jeff. At times we do share with each other different struggles, and I think the great thing about is the solidarity amongst the change makers, and I think you do see that in the social media. People, kind of encouraging each other and being there. I mean, I can see the energy of Sonalie and what she's doing and what. So I think that is it's an exhausting emotional challenge being in this field. I'm sure Jesse, you're going to agree with me, but I'm really proud that when you do good, there's always good people around, and I think you just have to reach out. One of the greatest things I've learned is ask help when you need help. So many minorities feel in our culture we shouldn't ask help because it's just not the way we do things. But for me, I'm like, no, ask help. And today I'm only here in my position with certain successes because I've asked help, and I'm always grateful to that help.
That's so emotional and aspirational. Thank you for sharing. Sonalie, what about you?
I'm just so moved, and I just feel like my challenge is not that, but what a beautiful story. I think I think I'm the only woman on the panel, so I do have to share that I did not get taken very seriously in the beginning. Um, I'm also not white, and I'm also not Chinese. So I did not grow up as a minority, but it's funny, I grew up as an expat, but I'm not really an expat because I was born here and my parents have been here for 45 years. So I actually feel like I'm actually an immigrant, but that's not a word to be used. So I think there was this, for a long time, people, even when we became a media company, people kept calling it a blog, which is in media terms can be a very derogatory term. So I think there's just like kind of not being taken seriously. And it took a really long time and just to have that kind of impact as a media company. And the world of media is a very closed world. Most media companies are owned by billionaires and mostly men. And it's just it's very difficult to do things differently, especially because, for example, 95% of Green Queen is editorial. Sometimes, most of the time, it's actually 98, 99%. So we are trying to operate according to kind of a very ethical integrity standard. And in Asia, we actually don't have very strong truth in advertising laws. So a lot of our kind of newer, maybe competitors in the space, they're not very good maybe about disclosing if they were paid. So that's another big challenge, is kind of just, we live in the era of fake news and just like being a media that really prides itself on authenticity and integrity and doing our research and not just being a clickbait kind of space, like really wanting to offer news that is trusted and that you could share at work and not be worried that what you were sharing wasn't true. And that's difficult. And then obviously it's financially, it's a struggle. I mean, media is not a business you should go into if you want to make money. And of course, we are super careful about who we work with. 90% of people who approach us, we have to say no, because it can't be animal, it can't have animal ingredients, it can't have really plastic or single-use packaging, it can't promote anti-climate investment. So that eliminates like financial services, which are a very lucrative way to make money in advertising and media. It can't be anything that promotes anything that we consider greenwashing, which is prevalent a lot, especially now that sustainability is a hot topic. So that's a challenge, right? And just like really, there are some days where it's like really hard to just stick to your values, in the sense of saying, well, I want to keep the lights on and I want to make sure my team is paid a fair salary, but I also don't want to compromise Green Queen in any way, because I truly believe that if we compromise our integrity as a media platform, like once you lose the trust of your audience, it's gone. So that's another challenge. And then the third biggest challenge is obviously feeling every day like I'm not doing enough, and that does anyone care about the planet at all? And of course, I'm torn because I listen to Jeffrey and Jeff, and I think, well, those are causes that need our immediate attention too, you know? Um, but what about the planet? You know, what happens if we have no more resources? We have a serious food security problem that's going to, Asia is going to be disproportionately affected by climate change. And just most days it does feel that no one else really cares. So sometimes you just have to be the only one, be the one that cares, and my team, and we do feel alone sometimes. We feel like we're a very different type of media. For example, it's Christmas and every other media is promoting buying. And on our site, we've got a giant banner that says, "Don't give Christmas to Amazon." We could be making so much money from that space if we wanted to, but that's, if we start telling people to buy at Christmas, then we've sort of, who are we really? But all the other media are doing that. And so it's just kind of keeping that balance and keeping your North Star of, the planet and integrity and kind of our values. And that can be a difficult thing to do when you're just kind of like one of the only ones doing it.
That's absolutely true. I think the more you care, the more you feel that you're alone, right? Because there's only a few people who care so much. So I think that's definitely a struggle, lots of community builders like us have, but you just have to keep pushing sometimes. So it's a lonely battle, but it's a really rewarding one. It's beautiful. Thank you. What about Jeff? I think, oh, sorry, Yang. Let's go with Yang first.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think to some extent, even though, of course, like the things that I am involved in are in a completely different vertical and with a different focus, but I can 100% relate to what Sonalie is saying, because, I think, the challenge, it's like twofold, but it's kind of connected, right? And so it's really like not being taken seriously. And, I will give you like two examples. It's really, of course, me as an outsider, as a foreigner coming to Shenzhen and, not even speaking a word of Chinese at the beginning. Of course, many people would not take me seriously, like, who is this guy coming in here and trying to like do some events and connect us here in China? He doesn't know anything about the market. And, I remember situations like, you're trying to reach out to people with a good intention. And of course, I understand people are busy, but sometimes people would, really kind of look down on you. And, it's sometimes really challenging, because of course, you are kind of alone already because, you're here by yourself. Or in my case, I was here by myself, like nobody from my family or any friends here. You're kind of starting from scratch. And then when you're trying to connect with locals, then sometimes, you can basically get a rejection, and it hurts, right? Every rejection hurts, at some point. Of course, we need to learn through this process. We need to learn how to deal with it. And the sooner you learn how to deal with rejection, the better, right? The better for your business, the better for your community, the better for yourself personally, because we are just going to be facing rejection all the time, I guess, until the rest of our lives, And so that's one thing. And the second part of like not being taken seriously, and I think, I don't know if this happens in Hong Kong, honestly, but I've seen it a lot in mainland China, and not just Shenzhen, but I traveled around the country a lot. And, when I was running Startup Grind, and we were basically, working with companies like Google, and we would be sponsored, we would not be an NGO per se, but we would basically be out there to create impact, to create startup entrepreneurial ecosystems, bring mentors in, bring people that can educate people, local ecosystem, about how to start a business, how to go global from China, or even how to go into China as a business. And so we would kind of be really under the impact category, meaning that we didn't really have a business model, really. Like, we would charge for some tickets and we would have some sponsors and stuff. And what I faced a lot in China back then, and it's getting better now, I have to say, but back then it was every time I would go to a meeting with some sort of company or somebody that I wanted to work with, the first question they would ask me, what's your business model? Like, how do you make money? I don't believe that you just do this because it's a good thing to do. I don't believe that, you know, you just want to connect people for no reason. Like, you know, there must be something, some hidden agenda behind it, you know, like I think it smells bad, you know, something like that. So basically, like that was the problem in terms of like not being taken seriously that we faced a lot, especially when we really wanted to work with partners, corporates, you know, other people to just, you know, support us, because of course, locally in China, you need local supporters. Like Google is not so strong in China. Everybody knows why. And, you know, it's very obvious, but, you know, it's something that kind of opened some doors, but it didn't help us to really go local and impact the local ecosystem. So we had to work with the local players, but this would be really a difficulty for us to get them really on board as partners and, you know, stuff like that. And so, you know, yeah, I mean, how we push through, or, you know, it's really, again, like it has been mentioned here a couple times, it's really that long-term mindset, you know, that, you know, you just have that North Star, you know, you stick true to your values. You cannot alternate those values or the reasons why you actually went into it at the first place. And you just keep repeating, and at some point you just find people that believe in the same vision. Maybe not everybody believes, but you find 1, 2, 3 individuals in a huge organization, and suddenly, step by step, you start moving a needle, you know, and you get people excited, you get local people excited. Then, you know, at some point we managed to get Gary Vaynerchuk on our, you know, stage, and, you know, suddenly people, wow, like, you know, these guys are for real. Like, how come they can get this kind of guy here, you know, to talk and for free? Like, he does it for free. So how is it possible? How does this work? So basically, you know, this is the type of stuff, really just step by step. You have to be there all the time, and you just got to keep talking to people and find that 1, 2, 3 individuals that can help you, you know, move the needle. And that's what matters. That's how we kind of overcame the, you know, the challenges.
But that cannot be achieved without you being, you know, reflective as a community builder and believing in your long-term vision. So I think it's easier to say, much easier to say than to actually embody it. So, so last but not least, Jeff, what was your challenges? I imagine there are lots of challenges that you've faced during the journey.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, with Impact HK, we work with individuals who are in such a huge amount of pain, right? People that have given up on their lives, people that, you know, you try to help, that tell you stuff like, you know, don't help me, I'm not worth it. You know, I just want to die. You know, individuals that are always considering suicide. You know, the lack of hope, and these are individuals who have suffered massive amounts of trauma. And you know, trauma is not solved with apartments. It's not solved with jobs. It's not solved with jackets that transforms into tents. You know, this is solved with love. It's solved with kindness and care and connection and friendship and community and things that we all need. And, you know, when you think of challenges, you think of, you know, how do you help people like that? You know, and I think we're trying to find, and we're trying to grow as a charity and as a community on how to stand up and care for these people. You know, and again, you have the challenge of then having a society that look at people in such amounts of pain, and they judge them unfairly and condemn them and blame them and push narratives about them, unfair narratives, of course. And, you know, so you have that challenge of educating society. And then, you know, you wish that you could, you know, you have friends that are dying. You know, I've had multiple friends die this year, individuals jump off buildings, you know, all types of deaths, really. You know, it's very common, you know, and that's the work that we're taking on. And so it's a huge challenge. But, you know, at the same time, we're very, very solution focused. I'm extremely solution focused. And I can do that because of the amount of progress that I see each and every day. I mean, I work with people who I've seen on the streets, who I met on the streets, individuals who were suffering, individuals who had given up on their lives, people, you know, with heroin addiction, severe mental illness, that were living in filth on the streets, who now are in apartments with us. They've got full-time jobs with us. They're laughing with us. They're engaged. They're camping with us. We're drinking beer in the Dai Pai Dong. We're friends. And I've seen that, and I see it every day. I see individuals who had given up on their lives who are now fully engaged and so hopeful for their future. So yes, you have amazing challenges, but when that amount of love and community is just surrounding you each and every day, it just makes you want to get up and just focus on the solutions. So yeah, there are definitely massive challenges, but at the same time, we see that this path is working, and we just have to continue mobilizing people, and we can do this because of just so many caring people in Hong Kong. And yeah, we're excited just to continue kicking ass on challenges, really, I guess.
That was incredible that you can channel such emotional momentum into to structure it really well to actually implement it like into actions. So I think that really takes lots of determination and also strategies, right? It's not just about emotions, it's lots of strategy as well. So thanks a lot for sharing. That was beautiful. So moving on, we're going to ask more specific questions to each of the panelists. As you might have noticed, we have a very diverse panel. So everyone is kind of like tackling different challenges or building different solutions, but there are lots of similarities under this huge umbrella of future cities and communities for evolutionary purposes. So the first question will be addressed to Jeffry, and it will be about the ethnic minority movement that he has started in Hong Kong. So the question is, Jeffry, what do you envision for Hong Kong to become this future city from a perspective of an ethnic minority? And why is inclusiveness important for building a resilient city? And how can Hong Kong become more inclusive in the process of, say, policy making, agenda setting, and decision making?
Well, that's a lot to cover, but I think, look, I mean, Hong Kong, we pride ourselves as Asia's world city, and sadly, I always see it as usually it's the Chinese community and maybe the expat community. So that's the international it seems it wants to promote. But the ethnic minorities have been part of Hong Kong's fabric for a long time, but we are not celebrated. And one of the things I've always said is an inclusive city should, recognize every individual and the diversity that it brings. Today one of the things why many ethnic minorities don't have a sense of belonging to the city is, you look at our textbooks, children go to school with each other, ethnic minority children and local Chinese children, and there are no textbooks that talk about the contributions of ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, even though we've created one of the most iconic, ferries, the Star Ferry, which takes you from, across the beautiful skyline. We've funded the Hong Kong University, and, we've served in the army. The Nepalese had fought Japanese occupation and whatnot, but you don't see that in textbooks, and that's why there's no sense of belonging. And one of the things that I was, reasons I stood for elections was I wanted to bring that change, bring this face, the image into the political structure, and therefore we having a voice for ourselves. Maybe next time, let's see. But I do believe it's time, because an inclusive city should have all voices in the policy making, because it's now we rely on certain political groups to bring our agenda into it, but it's not always there. We could be flavor of the week, flavor of the year, but next session the politician can completely say, oh, you know what, there are other needs, and we are at the mercy of these guys. So I think it is time. The city really truly embraces us by giving us a voice, being part of the new Hong Kong we're all talking about. Everyone's talking about Hong Kong identity now. And in fact, we also make up part of that. So I do hope we do see policy changes. My dream as a politician, if I did get in, was to create a museum for our contributions, create a space where minorities can feel at home to celebrate their cultures and showcase that to the Hong Kong community, because there is such a cultural gap right now. Many people still don't know the difference between Islam and Hinduism, and between an African male, there's amongst the African community, there's 54 countries. People think, oh, Africa, just one. And that I don't blame the general public. I believe because the systems did not really want to celebrate that, want to talk about that. But now I believe we're at a very unique time. It's 2020, 2021 coming up. The world is more connected now because we've been forced to sit down at home, Zoom with each other. And I think people want to know beyond Zoom, who are you? What are you about? So I'm very proud. I must say our Chungking tours, which again, like I said, does that. It brings people without allowing you to travel outside of Hong Kong to come into the building and see the different races, the diversity, the religion, the culture. And I look forward to making this a more impactful thing. Maybe in the future we will have that museum. Maybe in the future we will have that politician or a chief executive, maybe, or someone in more mainstream, influential parts of the society. So that's the dream, and I think it will happen.
Beautiful. I think as much as we're trying to advocate for certain rights or values, people has to kind of experience or see it to really understand, to appreciate it. So I think what you're trying to create here, the experience, right, is something more profound, right? Something that can really stick, like really stay with people. And I believe that is really, really valuable for the city. So thank you so much. Next question is addressed to Sonalie. So Green Queen, as you've mentioned, you're trying to change behavior, and this is incredibly difficult, right? You can have a newspaper like SDNP and you talk about news and people get emotionally stimulated, but there's no change in behavior. So you have the theory of change where you want to get people to shift their day-to-day kind of consumer behavior, and that is just incredibly challenging. So how do you describe the impact that Green Queen had on your readers' daily life? And how do you think the Green Queen movement you started could scale from a community level to society level? And if, as you have also mentioned briefly, there are elements specific to Hong Kong, and could you just highlight some of those so for our audience of Hong Kong to kind of relate to?
Thanks. So I think this is where I have maybe a similarity with Yan, because essentially we are the first point of call, much like Startup Grind with startups. We are the first point of call for new entrepreneurs, founders, kind of pioneers, activists. They find us first and they come to us first. And so we are able to provide them with their first showcase, their first storytelling. And so I feel like that's been a huge impact for the green movement in Hong Kong, because we often do a story on someone and literally that brings them that, the SCMP will cover it 2 months later. And actually some of the editors have told me that they read our newsletter and kind of, in other words, they're basically fishing for stories. So we are often the ones that do the first research and the first highlight. So I think, over the years we've featured, thousands of these businesses or organizations or people, and so that helps to amplify their message and their work, which creates waves throughout the rest of the city. And then for our readers, I think because we're holding this space for the Hong Kong community of people that want to, be cruelty free, be waste free, be planet forward, we allow them to kind of believe that there are options and solutions, which kind of helps their activism. So that's really how I see it from that point of view. And now we're able to do that on a wider level. But for, say, just like we're the first point of call if someone's starting a green anything, we're also usually the first point of call for a reader or a person looking to greenify or make more conscious choices or what have you.
Interesting. And also you have to have this credibility, right? For people to first to look out for you as a first reference point, and also the scale. So I think that's not easy to achieve.
I think we have a long way to go, but I think when you are the first or the only person kind of talking about something or writing about something or sharing information, the way the internet works makes it so that that's how people find you, and so that kind of ended up happening. A second part that ended up happening, which as I mentioned earlier was not planned, is that I kind of ended up being this person that ended up speaking at many events and kind of being this activist more publicly, which I'm happy to do, even though that really wasn't the plan. But I think people need to have different entry points to connect with you. So for some people it's social media, for some people it's the articles, for some people it's the newsletters, for some people it's our events, which obviously are on hold because of COVID. For other people it's, you know, listening to a panel. But all throughout it all, there's this common thread of again holding this space for like-minded people to feel, you know, listened to and heard, and to feel like they have options.
Absolutely. I would say for communities, it's incredibly important to create different touch points, right, with each member, every member of your community. It can be media, right, but sometimes it's very one way of information communication. But with this type of, you know, events and, you know, talking to people, I think this is where you can get trust and get traction. So it does take time, take lots of painful, lots of effort, but I think it's totally worth it. So thank you so much for sharing. So the next question is addressed to Jan. So I'm not sure if you have ever been asked this question before, but you know, as your movement starter, you start a movement of this incredible foreigner-led startup tech and innovation movement in the city of Shenzhen, or we can say China. To what extent do you think this movement have gave young people hope and motivation to challenge the status quo and strive for a better livelihood in their day-to-day life?
Yeah, you know, I haven't been really asked this question before. So yeah, thank you for the challenge. I think, you know, absolutely, you know, like I would maybe answer it in a way that it's true that especially through Startup Grind, we would deal with a lot of young people, with a lot of people. Of course, now maybe it's slightly different because we really focus on investment community and, you know, the entrepreneurs that already have some sort of foundation built and they maybe want to go global and stuff. So just, you know, based on that, of course, they have some sort of experience. And so they're much more, you know, they know kind of what to do or what they're after. But when I was starting with Startup Grind a couple of years ago, it was really dealing with people that are either first-time entrepreneurs or that are even out of college or university students that, you know, maybe want to intern at some companies and they just want to learn, they want to, you know, connect with people. They, you know, yeah, sometimes it was as basic as, you know, they just want to kind of hang out in the international community to kind of get ready for their, you know, studies abroad and stuff like that. You know, these kinds of things that we would be dealing with a lot. And, you know, so I think we were kind of the catalyst, or, you know, I would definitely not put myself in a position saying that I was the person kind of doing that, because we had a lot of people supporting us, a lot of local people kind of helping us to, you know, create that vibe, create that community, and really even help us localize the community, because it's extremely important that we have learned along the way that, yes, you know, we can offer something unique to those young people, to everyone who comes to our events, everyone who wants to kind of be in touch with us. We offer some unique speakers, unique content, unique experiences, but at the end of the day, we also have to localize as much as we can, because maybe the needs of people here are slightly different than in Silicon Valley or than in Europe, where, you know, where we were much more, let's say, developed or advanced in a sense in terms of ecosystem, you know. And so, you know, I don't know if we gave people hope, honestly. You know, I would not like to put myself in a position that, like, you know, we changed people's lives in a way that, you know, the other panelists today are mentioning, because there are probably bigger problems out there to tackle and to discuss than, you know, if we actually help people to maybe pick the right path in, you know, an internship, or, you know, if we help them raise money, if we help them to connect with a mentor. But if I kind of, you know, keep it in that silo, if I keep it in the business startup silo, then, you know, we have definitely, you know, brought people together and a lot of resources. You know, I even now, even today, I get people messaging me, you know, telling me that because of Startup Grind, because of some event that we hosted, you know, they met their co-founder, they met their investor, they met somebody who really guided them throughout the journey, and, you know, they are now running a company. We even had some really successful entrepreneurs these days, you know, that are very well established. And I remember in the early days of Startup Grind, they would come out as a speaker and they would ended up connecting with some, you know, entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs, or even investors. And so, you know, I cannot say that we were, you know, detrimental to their success, or we were like very, 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 very important piece of their success, but we're definitely there, and that's something that, I just find amazing myself, when people come back and say that they were able to extract value, because that's why we exist at the end of the day. We want to provide people value, no matter how big or small it is. We just want to give something, and so that's definitely something that we have done, and I think people appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to measure how much value you've provided, right, in this kind of community setting. But the very reason I asked this question is because the startup events, the first one I attended in the Techstars is a startup weekend, right? It's like 48 kind of marathon of building a solution with a team of like-minded people, completely changed my life, right? It's the first time I feel like I was so empowered to be able to address the issue that I care so much about with a little app, and that was the defining moment of my life. I decided to be an entrepreneur. So that was definitely a lot of motivation and power. I feel like was, just in that 48 hours that happened. So I think it's really hard to really generalize or understand the value of these events, but they're really there. So
no, you're absolutely right. I think it's very hard to quantify and why it's hard to quantify is that the feedback loop is not closed necessarily every single time, meaning that, you introduce a person or the person comes to your event and they maybe meet their potential client, which, has happened to me many times. Honestly, people sometimes get back to me, not all the time, but they get back to me. They're thankful, they invite me for a beer later on and stuff like that. But, you have these stories. And so why it's hard to measure is really that sometimes or usually people are busy. And even though they meet somebody at your event, they don't even realize maybe they met them at your event because they start doing business with them 1 year later, right? So it's really hard to quantify. And, we have stories, we have quotes, we reach out to our community, or we did it a lot because Google was asking us for that to kind of at least, showcase the impact, not maybe measure it in numbers, but at least showcase the impact. So we would reach out to our community and ask them what kind of value they got, what should we improve, and stuff like that. So we have some quotes and we have some stories for sure. Some of them are just amazing, but it's absolutely very hard to put a number or to quantify if we actually change somebody's life or if we change the course of their business, But I believe in that serendipity aspect. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. So I believe the value is there.
Right, just keep connecting, right? You never know how many miracles you're creating. I think it's really easy to do what we say, but sometimes as community builder, it's really hard to say what we do, right? Because the value is so enormous that we could fully capture. So yeah, thank you so much for that sharing. So last but not least, Jeff, we're gonna come back to you. And your question is of course about the hashtag kindness matters. So how has the Kindness Matter movement changed Hong Kong? That's a big question, but maybe you can try to kind of give some perspective. And how do humanity's shared value, this kind of very innate value of us, the kindness, the compassion, create a unity among people from all backgrounds? And what is your outlook for the Kindness Matter movement in Hong Kong or even beyond?
Yeah, kindness matters. I wear these shirts, I've got a lot of them now, but I wear these Kindness Matters shirts and hats all the time. A lot of my high school friends on Facebook, they must get a kick out of what I never would have thought I'd be wearing shirts walking around town saying Kindness Matters on them, back in the day. It's just crazy what's happened here. But, Kindness Matters and Impact HK really started just with one single kind act. And I think that's why it's so important, in getting into the education system as a charity. And I'm really proud of us as a homeless charity investing so much time in the education system because, at the end of the day, that's the future. These are future leaders. These are individuals who can change Hong Kong in many ways. And, if you can get in there and work with them and really teach students and the youth the importance of caring for people in need, but also teaching them, the importance of just taking a step towards something that you care about, not in taking that first step and thinking that you're going to change the world, but really just in taking a step, and hopefully that results in another step in an education of how you can make a greater impact. And that's what happened. Me and my friend went into a park to feed the homeless, and it led to leading and inviting friends to join, which became popular, and enabled us to take that further step to going twice a month and then 4 times a month and so on, and it really became a movement. But I think at the end of it, it really is, it does embody our core values as a charity, and I hope that Impact HK will be here for hundreds of years. And really, it is about kindness, and it is about caring for people in need. But that also is reflective not just in working with the homeless, it's with you and I, and in the workplace and schools. When you have students, I tell students, when your classmate's acting up and he's acting a fool, and well, there's a reason for that. You can point at him and judge him and laugh at him, or you can use your kindness to him, try and help him, empower him. And I think when I share that message with students, it's quite amazing to see how caring they are. It really blows me away. I never had that education when I was young. It wasn't really a focus. But I think when you look at our panel today, we talked about diversity. And I think that the key is diversity. I mean, cities that are diverse are so much stronger for it, right? But also, I think in most of the panel that we're all quite caring and passionate about the work that we do. And I think, that's what we need. We need more leaders that are very, very caring and passionate, but understand that leadership has to be focused on kindness and caring and standing up for people in need. And I think, where is Impact HK going to go in the future? I'm really not sure. We have big plans, but yeah, I think kindness matters is it just kind of came naturally as a hashtag, and I'm glad it's sticking around.
I think it will come as the core of one organization to maybe become the core of the city. When you have enough people who are start taking action, we become hashtag kindness matters city. I really envision that for Hong Kong, because I think people who are start acting has showcased that we have capacity for that. So you took the lead, and I really hope there's more people to jump on this bandwidth. So thank you so much for sharing.
We've got a Kindness Matters cap I could give to Carrie Lam, but it might mess her hair up a bit. But it would be pretty cool to see her wearing some Kindness Matters merch, wouldn't it? Be interesting.
For sure. That will make her a lot more relatable to people than she is right now. Okay, so speaking of the policy perspective, because part of the summit, the mission of the summit is also to connect the change makers on the ground with the policymakers. So we have people from Invest HK, and also people from different city planning councils across the world joining this summit. And we're also going to be replaying all these videos with them in different parts of the world. So my second to last question will be from a policy point of view. How do you suggest the government build or strengthen this type of communities, like really meaningful communities, both for evolutionary purposes, right? Either it is for ethnic minority, for the homeless people, for entrepreneurs, or for the people who care about our planet. So what would you suggest the government to do to safeguard and to strengthen these communities? So maybe we can start with Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it just now, really. We need leadership in the city that is caring, that stands up and puts a message out of the importance of caring for people in need. And I think Jeff Andrews highlighted amazingly, like textbooks not giving a true picture of who are these individuals that are such an important part of our community. This type of caring leadership is really missing in the city. And in the homeless, we see the exact opposite being done by the government of what really needs to be done to help these individuals, whether it be hostile architecture or having no places for them to go. And when they are going somewhere, they're treated like an inconvenience. And the amount of money that's being invested by this government telling people in severe pain who are hurting and hopeless to just go away and just go somewhere else. It's really sad. And, I think at the end of the day, we need leaders in this city that care. And it's sad to see that right now we don't have that. And it's tough to say that, but we just don't. So how does that change happen? I think it starts with all of us. I think all we can do at this stage is really focus on our actions and what we do, and understand that does have a ripple effect, and it will keep this movement going forward in many different directions, whether it be in helping the environment or animals or the intellectually disabled or the homeless or whatever. We have to all kind of take our part and really hope that message of caring will continue. And and eventually find ways to get, Jeffrey Andrews into the government here and make some major changes.
We need to get all of you into the government. That's the plan. No, beautifully said. Thank you for the perspective. What about Yang? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, again, speaking from the Shenzhen perspective and speaking from the entrepreneurial ecosystem perspective, I think honestly speaking, Shenzhen has been doing pretty well. Of course, there's still some things that has to be improved upon, especially now during the pandemic or even afterwards. It's really, and it comes down to the diversity as well, right? Because when you look at Shenzhen and compare it to place like Shanghai or even Hong Kong, it's really not as diverse, even in terms of the companies and entrepreneurs that are here contributing to the community. Yeah, there's a lot of maybe, I want to say, quote unquote, old school entrepreneurs, that work with the factories and they're doing their job very well and, they're shipping their products overseas. But when you look at the next generation startup entrepreneurs, again, it's the city itself and the community, the ecosystem itself is not as diverse. It's not as international, not so easy to connect to and to get access to information, when you just come without any knowledge, without any connections. And of course, we have been trying to be some bridge as well, but ultimately, you need support on that. I remember when I was getting out of college here, when I was finishing my studies at Peking University, it was actually super easy for me to get visa that they even called entrepreneurial visa, which basically you get for 1 year after college, which allows you to stay here without even having a job right after college. And you basically can explore starting your own company and this. And so, these things exist, but definitely, there are still some limitations. And even now, traveling because of COVID, it's just basically impossible. I just look at the regulation, and it's understandable, of course, but let's see how it's going to disappear, or how it's going to be solved, this kind of problem, because otherwise, the movement of talent and the movement of people, especially from overseas, is not going to exist at all. Because right now, basically, you need to go through 1 month of pain to be able to go to China, to go to mainland, and to actually, just let's say visit an event or be here for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, and maybe even go back afterwards. You need to go through thorough testing, and there is no direct flights. It was been canceled. For example, direct flights between Prague in Czech Republic and China, they existed before, but now they have been canceled, and they're kind of like, going just through a couple hubs in Europe. And again, it's understandable right now because we're still living in a pandemic and crazy kind of situation globally, but hopefully these things, will be resolved afterwards, because otherwise I don't think that people will be willing to come. And, the international talent is kind of even disappearing to some extent. I have so many friends that left China for many reasons, because of COVID, then they cannot come back because it was super difficult, and they kind of just gave up because they were like, I cannot wait for 1 year without proper job or something, and some people left because of other reasons. But yeah, it's definitely something that speaks to the diversity and, allowing people to get here and get maybe access to opportunities and be accepted in the Chinese companies as well, because that's also an issue that you hear a lot about. If you don't speak fluent Mandarin, if you're not kind of local, then you cannot really accomplish anything within a big Chinese company, because there is a ceiling for that, right? So these types of things that I don't know if they're going to be solved ever, but that's something to think about.
Yeah, it's really important for government to create this enabling environment, right, for any talent to be retained. And one reason Hong Kong being so diverse, I believe, Shenzhen increasingly so, is because of the government. I think policymaker is kind of on the track to creating this environment for us, but it's not enough. Right? Like, let's admit it, it's not enough. And that's why we need people like you guys to voice out, really take a lead and have more spotlight, have more visibility in the space to influence the policy making. So great. What about Sonalie?
So actually, from a climate and kind of sustainability point of view, we're not doing very well as a city. We are the 7th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, just us as a city. Most of that is due to our consumption of meat and dairy. We also have, we are one of the we win in terms of being the city that consumes the most seafood in the world, and I think we're second when it comes to consuming meat. So we're just really far behind, and I think we need to start with things like meat taxes. We need, a meat tax. So basically, I think this is the kind of regulation that you're going to see playing out across the world as the effects of the livestock industry on carbon emissions globally are made very clear. I mean, we all know it, but it's going to become policy. The other thing is, I think it's really crazy that we still don't have a waste levy. So our landfills are full, and yet there's absolutely no deterrent to produce more garbage. I mean, not for companies and not for individuals, not for organizations. So this is something that could easily be implemented. I think I wrote this in my weekly newsletter. On Mondays, I sort of write an editor's letter, and I talked about why don't we have chief climate officers? And I do believe that there was a chef in the US that made a plea for having kind of a secretary of food because of the rampant food insecurity that exists in the US and across the world. And I think, for me, why don't we have climate officers at the head of governments and at the head of corporations? I really find it difficult to understand why it's not more at the top of mind. As a Hong Konger, born and raised, proud to be, from this incredible place. I love Hong Kong people. I think that we missed an opportunity to be the leading green city in Asia. We could have, with a few policies, we could have become the absolute leader. And now we've also we're losing ground to Singapore, who has established themselves as a food tech leader and an alternative protein leader, and has basically convinced everyone, all the companies, to go there by giving them grants and funding and support and infrastructure. And one of the reasons they're doing that is because, as an island nation, they have a food security problem with 95% of their food imported. And we also have this problem here. And I think that we could be leaders in food tech and in food innovation, which essentially helps with food security and finding alternative proteins that we need. I mean, people often kind of think that it's a choice, the whole alternative protein movement, but it might still feel like a choice to people right now. But the reality is that at the rate of growth of protein consumption that is happening across Asia, we would need 7 planets to feed people if everyone in Asia started eating as much meat as is consumed in the United States per capita. So that's actually not feasible. We don't have the 7 planets. We don't have the resources. So alternative proteins are a must. They have to be part of the solution. And especially for cities like Hong Kong, where we can easily get completely isolated. And I think there was a moment at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, which we experienced earlier than most countries, when we were sort of shut off for a while, and China closed its borders, and then the rest of the world. And I mean, we could easily run out of food if that were to happen on a bigger scale. So what's our plan for that? And then, of course, our air pollution. It's just part of being a livable city is air pollution. And while there has been some progress made, again, a few basic policies could really turn things around. I mean, I think we still have a chance if there is a will to turn Hong Kong into instead of Asia's world city, Asia's green city. And I really hope that we prioritize that, because, of course, what no one talks about is the hidden costs of not putting the environment and ecological concerns at the front. There are hidden costs to food waste. There are hidden costs to pollution. There are hidden costs to, eating too much meat. That's all paid for by, by needing more insurance, or healthcare systems being pressurized, or the fact that we don't build our buildings to be green, that causes problems down the line. There are actually economic consequences to not putting the planet's health and our community's health first. So I think there's quite a bit to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just this sense of urgency has not yet been kicking in, right? Hong Kong has focused so much on the competitiveness, right? Innovation, tech, maybe young will be, part of this trend. But I agree, there's so much cost that we're not taking into the calculation. What about Jeffrey? So just be a little wary of time. Maybe we can just have a quick.
Sure. I think I'll go straight to the point. I think sadly, what I look at many of the major governments of the world, it's a lack of representation. Forget just diversity, right? We're talking even the younger generation. It's all filled with older generation where it's not in, there's no dynamicism in there. And I see that in Hong Kong. One of the opportunities missed was last year when we had the social movement. The government did this, dialogue, which was televised on TV. But when you look at it, there was no minorities. There was no, I thought the government had an opportunity there to kind of say, look, we're at this mess together. Let's give a quota to 2 minorities. Let's give a quota to 2 from the LGBT community. To have this diverse range of voices that we can fix Hong Kong and move forward. And a year on from there, you look at today, it's still the same. And I think that's where the government needs. It needs to be more relatable. Come down to the communities. Right now they say they understand the needs of the communities, but I've never seen any of these government officials come down. All I see them is when there's these cultural shows. They'll come and cut a ribbon, stay for 5 minutes, won't even get a chance to even know what was going on, and they're off. And I've witnessed this in my own eyes, and I'm thinking, how? I mean, Jeff Rotmeyer was saying, he's done such great work with the social media. There was a fire in a footbridge a couple of years ago. Not one government official visited. When you see a fire in any other place, they'll go down and visit. Show some solidarity and empathy. Nothing. So it does question how much does this government or any governments are really relating to the common people. And I think right now, especially with the pandemic, is a time to reset, re-energize, and get some dynamic young people who are trying to make change and also have a new communicative style instead of this, we know everything, and it's not working anymore. The young people are now taking ownership of their city themselves. And you don't want to see another social movement. You do want to see social good come out of these things. And we just hope for the next couple of months as we come out of the pandemic that we as the change makers continue on with that change.
We just need to put you in the government.
Well,
on that note, thank you everyone for the panel today. I'm so sorry that we don't have time to address these 2 amazing questions. So for the panelists, would you be fine to share for example, your LinkedIn or your email so we can have a follow-up discussion? Because I really believe, this is an ongoing conversation, right? All of us are part of it, building our future city and starting or being part of other movements that we really care about. So it's really not just gonna stop here. We need to keep having this conversation open. And as change maker, it's easier for us to kind of start something and in our bubbles and feel good about it. But it's also important to kind of branch out and talk to other communities and see how we can synergize, how do we create compounding effect, and also connecting with the policymaker, right, to kind of sustain the change, right, to shift the equilibrium. So I think that's incredibly important. Not sure if Yvette, do we have time to still go over the questions, or kind of yeah, but just want to be aware of our panelists' time. Just wanted to say again a huge thank you. So if people can unmute themselves, we can just applause for this wonderful session. Thank you. Yeah, and also thank you so much for Future City Summit team for this incredible opportunity to connect us all. And so finally, in the spirit of the summit, I really hope just more people can start taking action to build bridges instead of wars. Be curious and listen to others, pay attention to our similarities instead of differences, and move forward to build meaningful movements. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you, Jesse.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great job.
Thank you so
Jesse,
much,
can we
everyone.
have
Great stuff.
one photo?
Thank you. Thank you.
Jesse, can we have one group photo for everyone?
Oh, one group photo. Yeah, absolutely.
I think Pramada is here. Pramada, you're there. You're good at it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Pramada,
Thank you.
Joy?
On your cue, Pramada, on your cue.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Okay.
so we're gonna
Smile. 1, 2, 3. Oh, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
thank you so
you.
much, everyone. Have a good day.
Guys, have a good week.
Guys.
Have a
Good
good
to
Thank
see
week.
you.
See
Good
you.
to see everyone. Thank you, Jesse. Great moderating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Bye.
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 thank you.
Bye-bye.